And I just want to say one thing that I saw in his biography that was very impressive. He is a graduate of the United States Military Academy, which is known as West Point, the School for Army Officers. And that's a very impressive pedigree to have in his education and built from there. So, Mr. Davidson, if you'll begin.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to start off with a thank you, first of all, the Global Forum for inviting us all here to talk about such a vital topic, and the City of Oulu for hosting. And most importantly, for you spending the time for this sort of collaborative discussion that we'll have, public and private from government and industry. I'll focus primarily on the idea that your technology solution might be my security problem. So I often talk about the relationship between the CIO and the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. The CIO wants to bring as much IT to the enterprise as possible, while the CISO wants to do that in a secure fashion. So globalization is good. It brings many challenges as we go forward, but we have deeper and deeper supply chains, lots of breadth that we don't see well into. So we actually have to better balance the cost, schedule, and performance triangle. Anytime we build this into our enterprise, we are often enabled with the cost and schedule first. How cheap can I get it? How fast can I implement it into my enterprise? And we often trade out performance characteristics of sustainability and security. So we have to make sure that the users who are consuming these products into their enterprise understand if I buy it cheap, it may not last as long. It may have security implications when I build it into my enterprise. And we often don't have that discussion as we move forward. We do want to have good discussions of globalization and how good it is that brings innovation and allows us access to the modern technology. I often talk about this model in the forms of acquirers and suppliers. Recognize we don't always buy from the direct OEMs. Sometimes there are distribution houses in the middle. Sometimes there are systems integrators who buy subcomponents, build them into massive systems that we then build into our enterprises. But we often use those differently than they were originally intended to be used. So I talk about those organizations in the terms of people, process, and technology. So any organization that you're going to build and rely upon has some process. It wants to take in products, do something with those products, and push them out the other side for some purpose, either to sell them or provide a service. You have people that you train, educate to manage those processes, and you have tools and technology that assist them in doing their job. That model links together in the supply chain. So each of those nodes and acquirers and suppliers links their people to do those processes, links the processes, and from an interoperability perspective, works the linkage of those technologies to each other. What we often forget is the standards that we want for interoperability have to be complemented by the standards we need for security in that space as well. So we have this globally interdependent supply chain, and we're globally dependent on that supply chain. So often critical components are built into our enterprise that we had no knowledge of who built the hardware, who wrote the software, actually who is providing the services to us in some respects. So you need to have better visibility into that supply chain so you can better manage the risk to your enterprise. What I often describe this, I'm one ahead of myself. I think I must have lost a slide there. So there's another slide somehow I dropped from my deck that actually shows from the 1980s to 2012, we've changed for most of our enterprises in the US and it's across the globe as well, that about 80% of our products, our enterprises, were composed of custom products. And then about 20% were COTS, commercial off-the-shelf products that I built in, just bought and built into my enterprise. That's actually turned on its head now some 30 years later. About 80% of all of our enterprises are composed of commercial products. And I only have about 20% of those that are actually customized for my specific application. So do I really know that that COTS product, that commercial off-the-shelf product, was designed with my enterprise in mind, or did it make trades somewhere in the supply chain to complement a wider demand audience? So they may have traded off security applications that I want for my enterprise. A good example we had earlier today was the whole of government approach. If I'm buying something that I'm using for the entertainment business, entertainment sector, it may not be sufficient software that I want to use in the financial sector because I want more security in that arena. But often we find the same software modules are used in both arenas. So we don't have a good acquire-supplier dialogue in this space. So how do I articulate that requirement better between the acquirer and supplier. It's an overly simplistic cartoon. It doesn't mean all of my custom products are always secure, but I have the opportunity to introduce requirements that will make it more secure. If I buy a COTS product, I have to make a better fit-for-use determination. So in the supply chain world, to use the logistics vernacular of the previous speaker, I look and have to make a make or buy decision. Do I want to make this on my own and use custom, or do I want to buy a commercial off-the-shelf product and buy it from the normal supply chain? If I decide that I'm going to buy from the normal supply chain, I buy a product, I have to make a fit-for-use determination. Does it really answer the needs that I want it to do? Do I have to do some minor customization of that as well? And then I'm looking at an enterprise or set of systems that are composed some commercial products and some custom products. How do I build assurance levels in that world? When I talk to the commercial industry, they often say, well, you're telling me that I could build a special laptop for the defense industry, and you'd pay more money for that. I said, well, I don't know that's exactly true. It might be true. I said, but I would tell you if you treat all laptops the same, they're not all the same. They have different features and different functionality. So the original laptop developers built a laptop computer, relatively portable, not as portable as we have today, but they were relatively portable considering the desktops that we had at the time. And then some field engineer saw that laptop computer. He said, you know, if you could ruggedize that laptop, I could take it in the field. I wouldn't have to take notes in a notebook and bring it back to the office and then type it in the computer. And so they built that laptop with ruggedized specifications. They built it with different specifications, a different environment. They're both commercial off-the-shelf products. I write different requirements for that requirement. I think we're approaching that world in ICT, information communications technology, for both hardware and software. We have to better address those requirements and have that dialogue between acquirers and suppliers. In order to address this model, when I came into my job, I left the supply chain world of logistics, managing ICT, information communication technology, to improve supply chains for DoD and the wider federal government. And they say, can you turn that on its head? Can you look at the integrity of the products that I'm now building into my enterprises? So you can look at the supply chain of those IT products that I'm building in. How do I gain better trust and confidence in the hardware and software and services I'm building into my enterprises? We have really good dialogue between our mill-to-mill partners, between U.S. and NATO, U.S. and bilateral partners, et cetera. And we cultivate that and we work that arrangement to have sort of uniform demand signals. Still a very weak signal when you talk to the commercial off-the-shelf products, because lots of the consumption of those ICT chips in the world are all driven by the media world of gaming and telephones, et cetera. So we don't really drive the development of smart chips and software very well. If you step up that demand signal side and start talking government to government, we actually do have a common bond. We all have critical infrastructure. We want to protect our critical infrastructure. And if we start talking about the requirements of our critical infrastructure, our smart grids, our smart cities of the future, we actually have more uniform demand signal. We can deal with the commercial off-the-shelf products and maybe get that banded product that we're talking about from a COTS perspective. But we're very firmly believers of the fact that the best standards for interoperability and security actually come from the commercial sector. We want as light a touch as possible from a regulatory perspective and only treat that in the custom product side if we can help it. We're better off when industry develops their own standards, their own best practices for interoperability and security. And so we want to leverage that as much as possible. I would tell you that about 4 years ago, I started an effort within ISO that developed ISO 27036 on ICT acquire-supplier relationships. And I'll have that as a takeaway at the last slide for a reference for that, because it actually became a Part 1 free standard in ISO, which we don't do very often, to talk about this space. I will give you one anecdotal. So as I build systems into my enterprise, I often don't realize what the critical component might be in that enterprise. And I have an example from an engineering perspective. It's not information technology, but you're building a $7.5 million yacht. I go out and hire the right people. I build this nice commercial yacht, and I spend some money, have my friends on the deck. They're lifting the yacht in. $25 on a faulty turnbuckle becomes the weak link. It drops the yacht into the bay. Hopefully, the lawyer, and I'll say he's a lawyer in the top right corner up there. That's my alarm telling my time is over. Telling you, hopefully he wasn't harmed, but I would bet you he had insurance on that part. So what assurance and insurance do you have on the software that's going to the smart car you're going to drive, the smart city you're going to live in. And that's part of our discussion today, is trust and confidence in the software as we move forward in that arena. I remind you of the people, processes, and technology model. We need science and cybersecurity, how to measure those. All of those need standards in that arena. And as a takeaway, I wrote an article on this in Crosstalk Magazine. Cannot blindly reap the benefits of a global supply chain. Host a forum in the U.S. on a quarterly basis to discuss just public-private. It's free, and it's a reference for the ISO 27036. Thank you very much.